Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to those of you who are joining us from across the world today. We are delighted and honored to have with us Carrie Chan, co-founder and CEO of Avant Meats, the Hong Kong-based startup that uses fish cells to make cultivated seafood products like fish maw and sea cucumber. It recently raised $3.1 million in a seed round. So welcome to Pandemic Punditry, Carrie Chan.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And nice meeting every one of you.
Yeah, our pleasure, our pleasure. So very, very exciting sort of times for, I think we've had Dr. Sandhya Sriram from Asia as well, also doing seafood. It's great to have another cell-based a company out of the Asian region. So we're very excited to talk to you today. What maybe to start off and give some context and sort of some background to our viewers. What was the rationale and inspiration for sort of selecting fish maw and sea cucumber as your go-to products? And if you can sort of share some issues around the current supply of those products in the market, and also how these products are sourced and used today, that would be useful for our listeners.
Yeah, so thank you so much. And so for sea cucumber and fish maw, they are the traditional Chinese style of dry seafood. So for those who have visited Hong Kong, if they go to Sheung Wan, there's a street food of these products. They are generally sell as a very high price. For example, fish maw, it could range between a few hundred to a couple of thousand US$ per kg in the conventional form. And why we would like to, when we ponder about bringing the technology to the China market, we of course think about the food angle, the cultural preferences, the traditional habit of preparing what people expect. And then of course we look at what is the challenges now for commercialization. Reaching, the cost of production is very high. It's actually one big hurdle we need to overcome. And then we've been trying to figure out, the product when they bring to the market, what is the technology very good at? And then combining all of them together, I think this product or this technology is actually very good at replicating the same nutritional profile as we can find in a conventional piece of, pork, beef, etc. So that is actually a differentiating factor between cell-based and plant-based sort of. And then nutritional is definitely a functional aspect that nowadays Chinese consumer regard a lot. And then of course the conservation impact of some of these ingredients that have been led to extinction of certain fish species, etc. High price point, and also simpler structure compared with, for example, beef steak for example. And that make the product a little bit easier to make. So combining all of this is actually a little bit holistic kind of brainstorming result. Then we come up, okay, let's start with fish maw, and that's how we started.
So I think it's interesting that I think you've discussed that unlike a beef steak or a piece of chicken breast or whatever, the fish bladder, which is the fish maw, is a single cell sort of organ, right? So it's very simple to make. It doesn't have muscle and fat. So theoretically speaking, your R&D costs should be lower than maybe if you were to sort of make the whole fish or something like that, or a fish fillet, I'm assuming.
Yes, definitely. There's only one cell type, as you have rightly pointed out. So in terms of producing the end product, it will be sufficient with one bioreactor of that particular cell type. And of course, although at this point of time, since we graduated from the prototype of the fish maw end of 2019, in November, we have launched our very first fish fillet prototype that is involving, muscle cell from grouper fish. And then, of course, in the product that is going to be launched, there will be, of course, becoming multiple cell type like muscles, the connective tissues and fat cell, etc. So I would say that fish maw is actually just a starting point. It's actually given us a very good starting point to work on fish as well as this more higher value product.
Okay, so and just so that people understand, I think there are like two species of fish, right? The Bahaba and the Totuba or whatever that produce the high end.
Right.
And Kartika is laughing because we've been trying to pronounce that properly. I hope I did that justice. But so those two species of fish are at the brink of extinction primarily because of this fish maw issue.
So traditionally, in the traditional Chinese medicine, bahaba is considered the most, the best fish species for producing fish maw. So because of that, any animal and species that is being lucky enough to be picked by the Chinese people as a delicacy, they basically run into extinct in a short period of time. So no wonder they're already in danger. So bahaba not legal to trade now.
Okay.
If people look online, bahaba is actually trading it is illegal. And
Okay.
then people actually find another, similar fish maw. The specific about that is that they have two antennae coming up from that organ. So they find another fish called totauba. And totauba have very similar looking swim bladder. And then that also close to endangered / extinction, plus vaquita, because now they're catching this fish as far as in the Gulf of Mexico and then drag them all the way after dehydration, ship it back to Asia for the very expensive market. And then now in the whole market of the fish maw, not all of the fish maw are created equally, so only about 20 something species are considered valuable when it comes to that part of the fish organ. So the other fish would not be have that commercial value. It's only certain species that is traditionally consumed for that purpose.
Yeah, I was surprised to realize that isinglass, which everybody knows is a finning product
Right,
for
right.
wine and beer, and hence the reason why most wine and beer is not vegan. That isinglass also obviously. So in terms of sort of market split between fish maw and isinglass, I mean, isinglass has been around for a long time, especially in old world wines like the French. So are they? Are they both contributing significantly to this depletion of fish resources because of both these industries?
Uh, I think that the science or the marine ecosystem will be a little bit more complex for me to really give a very good answer to that. But to my understanding, the species that people use to produce isinglass, there's a little bit more abundant, for example. And
Okay.
then it has not led to extinction, but then in particular, the fish maw, one or two of them has led to that problem.
Okay, great. Karthika, sorry.
No problem at all. Hi,
I'm just very
Carrie.
fascinated
Hello,
by this
hello.
whole conversation.
Hi. Yeah, I just want to tag on to this earlier point that you made about how trading bahaba is now illegal, and just ask a follow-up question because how large are the fish maw and sea cucumber markets in USD terms? And I also remember reading something where you'd actually compared the fish maw, industry to the diamond market.
Oh yeah, correct, totally correct. That market operate like the investment grade. For example, someone will keep a dehydrated fish maw, which is, like an A3 size paper, and then they put it up on the shelf, and they would never eat it. And then that piece will go from like 500,000 to over 1 million, couple million. It could be that increasing in price because so the price is actually supported by the scarcity. So when people do not have the demand and it's rare, the price gone up. It's a little bit more like diamond. So that's really investment grade. But there are a lot of functional grade that people consume it on a more regular basis. That is, people consume it because of the high quality protein / collagen, etc. And so that is the functional protein like diamond when they use in tours and bling bling and everything. So that's the market segment we are targeting. It's still quite more expensive on the price level compared to more other type of meat, for example, pork and chicken. So that's why it's interesting for us as a starting pilot product. And then when you talk about the other question,
Yeah,
it's
which is
about
like the size of the market.
the size of the market. So interestingly, because they're actually black markets, so that's quite a lot of, so some of it is actually not very regulated. There's not a specific trading code for that. So we actually read some informal data that the above ground market is like a billion-ish US dollar, and then half of them will be underground. If you heard about those above ground and underground, so it's actually quite sizable in this part of the world. Also pretty good margin to begin with, and that's why we think that it will be interesting as a pilot product. However, in the long run, we would like to, of course, expand into, like we have already demonstrated, our technology can produce fish fillet, like fish fillet burger, that could be used in a lot of international and Western menu and Chinese menu alike. So that will address a much bigger, food market in general.
So just quick follow-up question, Kartika. So, I mean, a lot of the initial cell-based food, wherever it was in the world that they usually started with like a mince product, like Sunday is also doing a shrimp mince. So you're not going that route, right? I mean, you're actually, what does this fish maw look like, and what does the fish fillet look like? I mean, it sounded like you're doing the actual fillet, or is it the fish flakes sort of packed together, or just want to understand what the first sort of go-to-market product will sort of look like visually.
Yeah, you rightly mentioned that. I think one of the challenge is that we, all of us in this space, one of the things is the structure and the scaffold. And then, of course, if we do not need to, produce the scaffold, the product will be lower cost to produce. It actually can be shipped out earlier and quicker. So that's a lot of benefit of doing that. In our case, we actually would be also in the product pipeline along that idea as well. So it will be actually launched in 2021, which is this year. However, having said that, for the fish maw, which is still like a solid piece of tissue, plus the fish fillet, which is a whole piece of the fillet that can be put in the burger. So the flakiness and the texture of that, we actually spent about close to a year to come up with the right scaffold that is both biocompatible, thermostable, pH stable, that could also really give the texture of a real piece of fish fillet. So we've done that actually as find a very reputable cooking like a chef in Hong Kong to review that for us before he agreed to become a food demo for that particular dish for us. So indeed we have two scaffold formula developed in-house as more like a secret recipe for us for these two products.
Wow. So I heard, is this the one that that I read somewhere is an algae-based scaffold that you're having?
So both of them. So like the fish maw is a totally different recipe as the way of processing. So the secret is not that much about what material that we put together. It's more about how we put them together and how we prepare them. So for the fish maw, it's a little bit easier. The raw ingredient, they are all plant-based. They are all accessible from kitchen, from supermarket, and from market. And then it's more about how we prepare that. So that's why it took so long. That's why it took us like 9 months to get to the fillet. We find that a lot of the ready to commercially available solution like soya protein isolate and soya texture protein, they are actually good. We tried that as well, but we find that the texture a bit more like chicken or pork, not so much like fish. So that's why we scrap all of that. I actually need to start from scratch and start with a whole different set of plant-based material and put them together and different way of mixing them and cooking them. And then finally we found the thing that it kind of like that. Of course there's still room to improve, but we are pretty happy about what we have seen in the prototype.
Wow. Kartika, sorry.
Yeah, no problems. So Carrie, so obviously we now have the fish maw, you have the fish fillet, and the sea cucumber, stuff that's coming up. Is there anything else you have in the pipeline? What's your grand vision?
So our technology is focusing on the full platform, like getting from the cell line to the cell culture medium, even the bioprocesses. We have a whole set of different our own solution, patent pending solution to address different part of that. So in the long run, we are looking at becoming like a B2B company as well as the technology licensing company. So in addition to the food, we also have a couple of functional protein application coming on board in the later part in 2021. So stay tuned. I would leave some of the thrill to that when we announce that, but that will be actually very interesting. We've done a lot of tests on the functional behavior of that material, that it could be used, internally supplement or even externally used. So that is the other product line that we are developing at the same time.
Okay, wow. And a lot of your technology is patent pending, is that correct?
Yes, we have 3 core areas in terms of the driving the cost reduction. So of course, one of the key is to replace the very expensive and not sustainable kind of FBS, the fetal bovine serum. Our own bioactive way of making the substitute, make it also a much lower cost than procuring directly from a commercial source. Plus the bioprocesses, we are actually trying to further improve that to be more suitable for this application, because traditionally the machine are designed to produce vaccines and biologics and not so much for cultivated meat. So that's also in our portfolio of the IP as well.
Karthik, I know you wanted to ask about the feet FSP.
Yeah, I really wanted to ask you about this FBS because we were reading up on it. And, there's this huge kind of ethical question about the use of FBS, right? So tell us your thoughts and, what direction you think that's going and what vegan alternatives there are for FBS.
So for FBS, definitely, I would say that definitely need to go in our perspective from at least 3 reasons. One is it's too expensive. 2 is that it is not sustainable. So the whole objective of starting this is that we want to remove animal from the whole supply chain of the meat. And then of course that fetal bovine serum for scientists, we know that it varies by batch. So for the QA/QC, it is not a very defined kind of ingredient. So could be very difficult to control the process down the line. And of course, last but not least, there could also be potential contamination, as we know for the mad cow disease. And it was back in the day now, and even in biologics production, there are many different ways to replace that. So in our perspective, we definitely need to replace that. And for our pilot product, we have already completed our serum-free formulation as of July 2020. So that actually helped us to bring the cost down by quite a bit. And then we are further improving the formula so that we can further drive the cost down before our pilot production.
So Carrie, if I'm hearing you correctly, you would actually have a replacement for fetal bovine serum.
Yes.
That's proprietary to you, which you could potentially then, I assume that was what you're talking about, the B2B, that you could potentially then sell to other people to use in their cell culture, or is that something you will keep in-house?
So at the moment, we're actually using it in-house for our own, because simply we do not have that capacity to produce for other use or other company or friends. But then I think down the line we do see that it will be useful. We're driving more data from that. We see the benefit of using our own way of making it more bioactive, and then we definitely use that in our own production. And then when we see that stabilize and we have a bigger team, we will actually see to also let it be available to other parties who would be interested in using that as well.
Great. That's a significant improvement. So that could be used not only by cell ag, but it could be used by medical pharmaceutical companies as well, isn't it?
Generally, yes. However, I would say that the product specification could be a bit different. In our case, that we need to make sure that it's food grade. So that means the purity, everything would be a bit, not as stringent and as pharmaceutical. Okay. But then if the cost makes sense to actually improve the specification by further purification, those kind of processes, of course, that would also be available, possible for that.
Very good. Sorry, Karthika.
No problems.
That answered your question you had, right, Karthika? About
I actually was going to ask like a different kind of follow-up question because given the parallels, obviously, between the vaccine development industry and the stem cell industry and all of that, and also the cultured cell meat industry. I mean, shouldn't everybody be working together? It looks like.
Yes, definitely. We are actually having a partnership under development. 1 or 2 of them would become official because we are actually working out some of the terms, how we work together. So that is in place, and I totally agree with you because there are a lot of things that we can borrow or learn from the existing, a little bit more mature operation with something that we can learn and from them, whereas in their perspective, they would also like to broaden their potential business scope or business like revenue stream in the future. So that's actually what we're looking for in 1 and 2 of the collaborator. We're going to announce very soon.
Karthika, follow-up question.
Do you have a question now?
Yeah, I was just kind of curious to find out. I was just thinking through the whole process of the advantages sort of this whole technology has on food in general, in a broader sense, right? So I'm just going to sort of lay out a scenario, and if you can tell me whether that seems logical or is that one of the advantages of what you're doing. So I mean, once you sort of get your cell lines sort of sorted out and stabilized, and you got your media to grow that in a bioreactor, and you got all of that stuff done, and you optimized it from a QA QC standpoint by using something that's plant-based as opposed to FBS. So you've got all of that done. It seems that this form of production of food is one of those things where you could easily set up a factory anywhere in the world at sort of a much more lower cost than if you were to do this in any other type of food. For example, if for example Beyond Burger or Impossible wanted to come to a small country, right, that had a certain market size, they won't be able to put a factory there because it's just those factories take a much larger investment and much larger footprint, right? So because there are many more amount of products that have to come out on a 24/7 line. Whereas in your case, you could decide, I put one bioreactor, or that's a one bioreactor country or one bioreactor city, and this is a 10, 20, 30, 100, 500 bioreactor city, and you just increase. It seemed very modular and much more friendly to scale globally. And also, you're not dependent on local resources, right? By if, for example, if you need peas or a protein, then that doesn't have to grow there. I mean, you could essentially your manufacturing media is easily shippable to wherever it is, I'm assuming. So is that one of the distinct advantages that you would have at scale eventually?
Yeah, totally. I think you basically have, you're actually our strategy. You could be our in-house, strategy guy. It's basically how that it could actually expand very efficiently globally, regionally. I think for different kind of meat, right? Some of the meat, for example, in particular, for example, China, and some of the, for example, pork is actually quite domestically produced. Right. Interestingly, for fish, it's actually I think it's the most internationally traded kind of animal protein food. Internationally traded means that the supply chain is actually very long. That means that in China, when people have more disposable income, people like to eat a lot more kind of different species of fish that is not regionally produced. Like people like fish from Norway and everywhere, North Europe and everything. So imagine the supply chain is actually across the world. So it's actually catching the fish there, drag them all the way from there to Asia. And along the way, they need to be kept cold, right? Otherwise, they will rot. And then, they need to fly on a plane. They cannot be on a ship. That takes 3 months to reach, so on and so forth. So I think using this method to produce seafood, fish is actually extra layer of benefit is that it drastically shrink the supply chain to as short as possible. And then people do not need to be next to the sea or river in order to produce or enjoy the food. They can actually have that even in the middle of a desert if there is a water pond and power, so to speak.
And so the raw materials for media is, I mean, is it mostly like sugar, water, temperature, pH levels? I mean, right? We're not putting a lot of ingredients into this media, I assume, or am I being too simplistic?
No, you're actually almost right there. So it's a very finite set of the ingredient, and all of them, some of them are inorganic, some of them actually very no different from what human being and need to survive: glucose, amino acid, minerals, vitamins, etc. Plus one or two of that more specialized kind of protein, especially we mentioned FBS, that from that source, but we have to replace that now. And basically that's it. And then we just keep the cell happy. Where they want to stay, and then where they want to live, and then that's the whole process.
By the way, I loved your analogy that you had mentioned in another conversation or interview that think of cell-based food as the meat equivalent of hydroponic vegetables.
Oh, right. Yeah,
Yeah, I thought that was brilliant. I mean, that was a very nice way to sort of frame the conversation, because I think everybody understands that now in terms of hydroponic agriculture, right? You put water in with nutrients, and you don't need the soil, you don't need everything else, and you can grow it in a indoor vertical environment. That's
Right.
and that's very similar to what you're doing with the bioreactor and the cell line and the media. So that was, by the way, brilliant. I think analogy of trying to explain a very complex sort of food production process. Karthik, I think you had some questions on how Carrie started her journey and what the steps were, because we wanted some entrepreneurs who may be listening in to sort of understand what she went through or what she did.
Yeah, so Carrie, so obviously part of this session is we're also trying to inspire other entrepreneurs who have ideas to get on the journey. So we'd really love to understand what it was like for you to go from ideation to creating a minimum viable product, and what steps and kind of milestones were sort of involved in the process.
Yeah, so I think that finding the idea that excites, get you very excited, and you decided, okay, if I'm not working on this now, although in the next this coming year, then I would regret after a year or two, then I think you should start doing something, right? So I come from a business background, and then I have been actually explore several business idea with my MBA classmate, and some of them becoming like a prototype, or some of them just remain an idea on the paper. And then until I think I've come across this idea and think that, okay, although we are not the first one, obviously, to really the first bravest one to develop that idea, the idea sort of proof of concept is already there. We just need to make sure that it happened in a way that is suitable for the market, sort of. Along the way, we also develop our own technological solution that could potentially be very helpful ultimately for the whole industry. And so that's the angle that we take. And then I think when I first come across this idea, I'm super coming from where I was in as a position, as I've been vegan for 5 years, and I've been trying to promote plant-based diet. I organize over 150 meetups. Meetup means that we strike a deal with vegetarian and vegan restaurant, bring a bunch of people. The smallest group could be 12 people. The largest group could be 60 people to a vegetarian restaurant, and to try to taste the food there, because people have the wrong impression that vegetarian vegan food are boring. There's just iceberg salad and nothing else, but actually there are a lot more interesting things. So I tried to do that for about 2 to 3 years, and of course it's good because we generate a lot of awareness. But then ultimately I found that the conversion rate to say, hey, I would like to become like vegan from now on, not even 100%, but 90% or most of the time, I do not hear that much of that. And however, I don't want to take the position of preaching and posing people or making people guilty about eating meat. So when I come across this idea, I think that, so this is it. I think this is the solution that make people happy, continue to eat meat, and also get rid of the, the impact on the environment and etc. So then, and then if each of us coming from different backgrounds, some of us maybe from marketing, some of us very obvious from the biotech, maybe from science, for food science and everything. I come from a not related industry.
You're an architect, I think, right? You're an architect in property.
I was in real estate. So, but then I figure out, I actually spent about 2 to 3 months time to think about it. So first of all, what is it about a certain vegan starting to make some meat, right? So I have to consider my peer and my social circle, what they think about me as well. And then the other, what role am I playing here in commercializing this? So then I realized that I actually talked to a lot of people. So for friends who would like to explore that, definitely, go to conferences, go to different meetups, and speak with people, and, very like thick skin, and actually knock on the door and speak with, professor, and ask them what, and then from there you'll find out what role you can take. And then I actually find that there are actually a lot of scientific advancement and development in this world, not just on cultivated meat, but a lot of the other. However, the world operates in a way that the scientists are very good at the science, but not necessarily all of them are very good at commercializing certain things. Commercialize means that a lot of things, including managing the finance, all the administrative stuff, being creative, coming up with product idea, go-to-market strategy, implementing that, everything that goes between then to the product market, which is a very long journey. So I realized that I have experiences of implementing project from a concept to the full 5-star hotel. So I know that I can do that. So that's why I thought, okay, I can have some role to play on that. So that's why I decided, okay, I will give it a try. So for friends who are actually thinking about that, think about that. If the idea come to you, it means that you can definitely do something about it. What you need to do is actually figure out what angle you need to take and what other people you need to bring on board that you don't have. Then it is essential, and then you can get a starting team to start your journey. So that's what I would suggest.
Brilliant.
Okay.
That really good advice.
Sorry, I had a follow-up question.
Yeah, sure do.
So you were, it was interesting because you were speaking about entrepreneurs needing to be thick-skinned and all of that. So I'm interested to understand, from the time you started the journey to now, what are the additional kind of soft skills that you had to sort of learn as you go to kind of carry along this journey?
Yeah, I think there are both. Both soft skills and some hard skill, I would have to say, because the biology, actually, when I start picking up the idea of, okay, let's start something, and I want to make sure that I understand what the scientists are talking about. So fortunately, we now live in a world of internet, so I can actually go through all of the Wikipedia pages and all of those self-learning kind of to learn about biology. From myotube, myogenesis, all this term I pick up from there, and then learning all of self-educate, a lot of them, so that I can communicate. So that's more like a hard skill. And on the soft skills, I think some of them I do benefit from my previous training and previous job, which is so architect is someone that who take the whole picture of everything that happened, and there's so different parameters that need to put something together that work in different, check all of the boxes. So I think that skill set, if you're already in that position, like project management or something like that, definitely very transferable. But if not, then maybe you would like to understand a little bit, taking those positions to learn, pick up some of the soft skills. And of course, then start working with a multidisciplinary team is something that I continuously learning every day. And communicating and managing expectation, in particular for the role in terms of the key person in a company, managing expectation and information within the company, from inside to outside, outside to inside, and those kind of things I'm continuing learning, I would have to say, like learning new things every day.
Aren't we all? I have a question on the regulatory sort of environment. I know that Singapore recently has got approved cell-based meat, right? And I think the first country to do so. I know you're doing a little bit of a dance here to try to match or be in sync with regulation and when they approve it and come to market, right? So you don't want to sort of be ahead of that curve. What's the environment like that in the markets that you're targeting, like China and which is the main market? What do you feel are the regulators receptive to products like yours?
Oh yeah, definitely for mainland China. So although it started a little bit later than US and other continents, but indeed they pick it up very quickly. For example, being the very first one in this cultivated meat technology space, first one in China, we had the privilege of involved in a couple of special meeting to talk about this new technology. They also see the whole thing in terms of alternative protein, like plant-based, fermentation, cell-based, and all together. And indeed coming up with new, for plant-based, for example, they just launched new guidelines for product labeling. And I think that for the cell-based is also in the middle of processing, scooping out the whole, scientific kind of scope and the technology. And then we look forward to seeing the regulatory guidelines or framework will be in place not too far, given that it's a very streamlined process in China. We are not talking about a lot of, lobbyists and people who can come out and say that you cannot call yourself meat and that sort of thing. So I think it will actually move faster. in China. I know that the work is being done, but then of course difficult to predict the time now. In maybe a year or two from now, I would reckon.
Wow, it's very good, very progressive.
Yeah, indeed.
You know how restaurants have menus that are marked like vegetarian, vegan for like plant-based foods and things like that. Do you think once the cell-based industry, starts really catching on, that the consumer who's buying should be advised from a menu perspective that, yeah, this is a cell-based version, this is like a animal farm version?
Yeah, definitely. I think even for fish, right, we have a label telling people that this is farm fish or this is wild caught. And I think that there will definitely be a new category, which is cultivated. And all comes with different value proposition. For example, we are quite sure that for people who buy into the idea of using this method to produce fish, then of course we know that there will be no heavy metal, no mercury, no microplastic, although it would not be like swimming fish, but people will make the purchase decision based on that understanding. And I do agree that it needs to be labeled clearly for that purpose.
So I got a quick, Karthik and I was discussing this earlier. So in terms of shelf life, right? So this is created in a very sort of sterile environment. You know the inputs. You obviously are engineering the output in a particular way. So in terms of bacterial contamination and all of that, so do you foresee that your product to be sort of, if handled properly, less susceptible to decay from rotting or anything like that? Obviously, temperature is obviously dependent on temperature, but what are the dependencies? I mean, are you looking at a product that's much more stable in that way?
I think then, what we see that is that, of course, in the production environment, it will be free of bacteria, basically very sterile. And however, depending on the packaging process, right? We still would recommend that it will be kept at in a fridge temperature, lower temperature, and depending on the packaging and the transportation. Indeed, it will be less prone to the bacteria attack because basically it's not exposed to that. But we do expect the shelf life would be a little bit longer. But we also think that nowadays there are also many different ways to keep the high pressure kind of treatment and so on and so forth. So it will help, but I would not say it wouldn't. I would not imagine that it would be double, because if you leave the piece of meat that we produce using our method and then leave it on the counter for a day or two, I'm sure that it will be actually consumed by the bacteria in the air.
Right.
So I think that on that part they would be quite equal. I think it might extend on the part that to a percentage that it will help with that process to minimize the potential risk of contamination. That's the key point of that. Yeah.
Well, you're certainly not going to have E. coli and all this other stuff that chicken salmonella, I guess, and chicken.
Right.
Those seem to be. I think I read a startling statistics the other that 90% of the chicken that's sold in the U.S. is contaminated with all kinds of matter, including fecal matter. So you won't have that sort of slaughterhouse related, on all that nonsense, right? So obviously, this is going to be very, as clean as it possibly could get. In terms of a meat product. Karthika, more questions for Carrie?
Yeah,
I know I have a few.
I have a couple of questions. So Carrie, I know you said you're launching this year, right? So what can we expect in terms of like a rollout strategies? Are you targeting restaurants first? When can consumers get it off the shelf in supermarkets?
Yeah, so there are multiple applications that mostly we would like to go B2B. We would like to co-brand and work with food product company, because we are definitely do not see that we need to build like huge factory to make it into fish cake, fried it, and packaging it. So it's not our core competence. Our core competence is the technology and how to further improve it, got to get the cost down, and also control the quality as a material. So we'd like to be in that position. And however, in the early stage, because the market and the consumer market is still picking up and trying to understand this, so we also take the position that initially we may need to do some B2B to C kind of exercise and get the consumer to try it before it is actually rolled out in a much larger scale, retail or fast moving goods kind of scale. So we are not precluding that we could make it available in, a smaller scale of food outlets. So that, for example, the fillet that we presented, it could be available once we have the early scale up, pilot running, that we could afford a small volume that provided to a few number of restaurants. We can actually do that. And then later on, definitely for scale, it will go back to the more like retail and those kind of scale. That's how we see that. Totally, because it's a very new industry, new kind of product. It's actually good to engage more directly with consumers as we develop our different product idea and applications.
It's really sounds like a very good strategy. Just a quick kind of a question, like a final question from me. So a lot of the challenge, I think, and people working on in cell ag is a lot about sort of getting the price down to be price comparable or parity. And I think that's why, I mean, your strategy to sort of get a delicacy like sea moor and sea cucumber, I think fish moor and sea cucumber is spot on, because I mean your parity bar is a little bit higher than if you were to just do a fish fillet, which you are obviously doing as well. But when do you see that parity sort of being achieved? I mean, that's why I think a lot of people seem to sort of go to the restaurant first as a starting point, because they feel that, okay, somebody goes to a restaurant, they want to pay more, or if it's a high-end restaurant,
right,
margins are there to sustain a product that's expensive. Do you see that improving because of the sort of the innovations that you've done in terms of the media and all of that? So you can achieve this price parity or get closer to it, close enough to it?
Yeah, I think that from when we started, like roughly 2 years ago to now, we see that the whole industry evolving very, very quickly, much faster than I would imagine back then, and then including the cost reduction. So if you were going to ask me, I think I would say price parity is something very relative, like general relativity. You only compare to the product that you are substituting. So then, of course, when you talk about the more general kind of meat type, not the like the fish maw kind of thing, we still need to get it like down to about 10, under 10, even like 10 will be super premium on a certain category, right? It should be under 10, 5 or something like that. So my totally gut, qualitative, definitely not quantitative or scientific kind of projection. We do see that the trend or the few tricks that we are seeing that we reduce the cost, it would be about 2025-ish that we can get really, really close to that. And I think that I see that the cost reduction come from different directions. It's not only one, right? So it's scientific breakthrough. There are also the economy of scale and everything. So part of it indeed is actually to be driven by the volume, by the mass. And then when the product is in the market, 2022-ish, I think it will start picking up some of the economy scale and then further drive it down. So that's why I think come up with a number 2025, something like that, far enough from now that we can say something about it. And I do feel that it could be quite achievable about that time. Yeah.
I mean, not bad for something that you started 2 years or 7 years, right, to get there. I mean, that's still a pretty aggressive and very
right.
impressive timeline. So, Karthika, any more last questions for you? Because
I have one. So, Carrie, obviously you've been on this journey for a while, right? But when news of the virus broke, right, the original, before it was classified as a pandemic, and so the virus broke, and then it was traced back to the wet markets and things like that. Was that almost like your kind of come to Jesus moment where you sort of realized, yep, I'm on the right track, I'm trying solving the right problems for humanity type thing? Did that kind of revitalize your sort of vision?
I think that it's very interesting that you put it that way. Actually, me and maybe one or two of our peers, we actually think that there definitely, of course, COVID is definitely one of the most not good part of the public health kind of episode in the human history. But that, of course, silver lining about it basically changed our lifestyle very drastically in different aspects. The other silver lining is that it is almost like a free very major marketing exercise and marketing campaign for both plant-based, I would say, plant-based, fermentation, and cell-based, because people just realize that the meat supply chain is not, it could be broken, and the way that it has been producing meat in that way is not sustainable. Public health and everything that point to say, hey, we need to consider alternative now. So I would say that the mentality before, even for the investment, right? We speak with people and investor. It will be mission-driven people who totally believe that, okay, it's going to happen one day, let's invest in that. And people still think that, okay, this is good to have. This is good to have when I have time and when I have money. Now it becomes more and more like a necessity and even an urgency. And I think that is coming up from COVID. That is like what I call like a totally free public, campaign for the whole industry, including us. And I think that's very huge. And we see that people start picking up this signal from their personal experiences, and then which is very helpful, I think, in general, and also shifting people behavior in terms of consumption. It's not just about cutting meat and plant-based and consuming cell-based, but it's also being more conscious about not creating that much of waste, and be more mindful about their environment, etc., etc. So yeah, I think that's definitely silver lining from that.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you. It's a great question. One last question. I said that before, right?
One more.
I'm definitely going to wrap
very good question.
So no, it's a follow-up to Carrie's point about investors. So has the investment environment, therefore, because I know that the type of work that you do require a lot of investment in terms of the scientific knowledge and the technology and everything else involved. Has that improved because of, just as you said? I mean, are you finding it easier to raise more funds, you think, because of the change in global perception?
I would say that, fundraising never easy.
It's never easy.
I think that, but then now the people who would consider that, like you have people who would like to invest in the stock market. Some people just like to invest in property. Now we actually find a little bit more investor. They would turn to say, hey, I would like to look into this sector or this tech. And I think that's definitely pulling in some extra investor into this space. And then previously, again, a bit more like mission driven and more patient and, positive energy investor to begin with. Thanks to them, we can start this journey with the support. And now we actually see a lot more financially kind of, a financial side, also very important kind of investor looking in this, because we now, given the approval, the commercialization path would even be more tangible. So that all of these factors help with helping us to get a bigger audience when we go to pitch. Because otherwise, you know that people invest in, I just want to invest in AI, I just want to invest in blockchain, and they are actually quite focused. But now we have people, start moving some of the money into this space, that we have a larger audience size, so to speak. So in that sense.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I mean, you're a pioneer in this area, and your part of the world. It's always, a pleasant and a joy to talk to female entrepreneurs. We love to promote them on our show as much as we can. Love to have you back at some point when you have more news to share. Thank you for taking the time from your busy day to speak with us at Pandemic Panditry. We wish you all the very best, and please keep in touch. And we're looking forward to, one day when all this is done and dusted, that we can actually taste your fish fillet at the very least.
Right. Thank you so much for having us. It's really a tons of very amazing questions. I think you guys dig very deep into that, and a very professional and detailed question. And I appreciate that we can get a chance to, discuss that here in your very, platform that is helping to drive this whole industry. So thank you a lot. And, all the best for everyone for 2021. Let's stay in touch.
Same to you. All the best.
So much.
Take care.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.